The wife of a rich man did not want to take the baby from the maternity hospital. When the doctors found out what the husband had planned, they turned pale. But before we continue, write in the comments which city you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. "That's not my child," Anna's voice, trembling with pain, broke the silence of the hospital room. She recoiled from the nurse, who, as if in slow motion, was holding out a tiny newborn wrapped in a blanket. Anna's tear-filled eyes scanned the baby's face, desperately searching for even the slightest resemblance, the faintest hint that this could be her child. But all she saw were unfamiliar features, foreign and frightening. "You're lying," she shouted, her voice cracking into a hoarse whisper. "That boy's not mine. He doesn't look like me at all. Where's my son? Give me back my son." Her hands trembled, her heart was breaking. Then a wave of hysteria swept over her like a storm. Anna collapsed onto the bed, covered her face with her hands, and sobbed so violently that her cries echoed off the sterile walls of the maternity ward, walls that had so recently witnessed her dreams of motherhood. Meanwhile, in the cold hospital hallway, Alexander sat, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Hot, uncontrollable tears streamed down his cheeks. His world had just come crashing down. His beloved Catherine was gone, snatched away like a candle in the wind, and the son he had expected from Anna, his legal wife, had never taken his first breath. "What did I do to deserve this?" he whispered, clenching his fists so tightly that his nails cut into his palms. "Why am I being punished like this? Why me?" His thoughts were jumbled, a growing void in his chest threatening to consume him. He felt utterly lost, crushed, as if fate had taken everything he held dear in one cruel blow. Midwife Mary Johnson quietly stepped out of the room, her face pale and her hands still shaking from the tension. She stopped in front of Alexander, trying to find words that wouldn't wound him further. "Your wife, she refused to take the baby." Her voice was barely audible, as if she were afraid to shatter the fragile silence. "She screamed that she wouldn't hold someone else's child. She demanded that I bring her baby, but you know what happened." Her gaze, full of sympathy, met Alexander's, but he looked right through her. His thoughts were with the baby, a tiny, helpless creature who had just lost his mother but was his flesh and blood. This child, Catherine's son, was now his only link to her, and the thought of him ending up in an orphanage tore at his soul. "No," he whispered, clenching his jaw to keep more tears at bay. "I won't let that happen. Never." "Start the paperwork," he finally said, lifting his eyes to the startled midwife. His voice was firm, though it carried the tremble of unshakable determination mixed with raw pain. This wasn't just a decision, it was his duty, a promise to the son he already loved with all his heart. "But, what about your wife?" Mary Johnson asked cautiously, raising her brows in surprise. "That's none of your concern," Alexander snapped, his voice sharp with fury and despair, making the woman flinch. "I said start the paperwork. I'll deal with my wife." He turned away, afraid she'd see his eyes welling up again. In that moment, he felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Anna, his wife, the woman he once vowed to protect, now seemed like a stranger. And Catherine, the woman he had loved so deeply and secretly, was gone forever, leaving behind only their son. Yes, he had cheated on Anna. That was his sin, his weakness. But unlike other men who married their business partners' daughters and cycled through mistresses like fashion accessories, Alexander was different. His heart belonged to Catherine. Her smile could brighten his darkest days. Her kindness and understanding had been his salvation. He loved her sincerely, even if he could never give her what she truly deserved. His marriage to Anna had been a business arrangement, part of a world where duty and obligations outweighed emotions. Catherine had known this. She never asked for more than he could offer. She accepted him as he was. Now she was gone. And Anna had rejected their son. Alexander's soul was torn between guilt toward his wife and love for the child who was Catherine's final gift to him. Alexander was a generous man. He had rented a separate apartment in the city center for his beloved, visiting from time to time under the pretense of late work. Did Anna suspect he had someone else? Possibly. But he had never given it much thought. He knew Anna wouldn't dare make a scene, let alone demand a divorce. That was simply out of the question. Her parents would never allow their daughter's marriage to fall apart. It would bring shame to the family. When Catherine told him she was pregnant, he didn't hesitate for a second. He would keep the baby. "I promise I'll do everything to make you both happy," he told her. "The baby will want for nothing." Catherine loved him and believed him. The very next day, he arranged for her to be admitted to the best maternity hospital in the city, giving strict instructions to a trusted midwife not to say a word to anyone. "Don't worry. You'll be well compensated," Alexander said, handing the woman an envelope. "That's just the advance. The rest comes after the delivery." Mary Johnson had handled situations like this before. She knew how to keep other people's secrets, and high-profile individuals often came to her when they needed to cover up the birth of a child from an affair. So it came as quite a shock when, just a few days later, Anna appeared in the same hospital. Mary Johnson did her best to act unaware, and Alexander rewarded her handsomely once again. That same evening, he had mumbled, "You have to understand, this caught me completely off guard. Catherine and my wife ended up pregnant at the same time, but both babies matter to me. Please, if anything unusual happens, let me know right away." Mary Johnson was in shock. One tragedy after another had shattered her to the core, and not even her many years of experience could have prepared her for this. She stood in front of Alexander, struggling to find the words to explain the unexplainable. "We ran all the tests," she said, her voice trembling with confusion and grief. "Everything was fine just yesterday, I swear. I don't understand how this could have happened." Anna's baby, the one she had waited for so desperately, was born without breath. The loss struck Mary Johnson like a knife to the heart. She didn't dare look Alexander in the eye, afraid he'd blame her, a powerful man, for everything that had gone wrong. After all, the grief hadn't only touched the child he expected with his wife, but also Catherine, the woman he loved, whose life ended on that same tragic day. Catherine, young and full of life, had suddenly started gasping for air on the operating table. The doctors, in a desperate effort to save the baby, performed an emergency C-section. But it was too late. Her eyes, once glowing with hope, closed forever, leaving only the echo of her last breath behind. Mary Johnson, who had seen the joy of birth countless times, now found herself in the middle of a double tragedy. Her hands, which had so often cradled newborns with tenderness, trembled helplessly, and her heart ached for the two families now crushed by grief. Standing before her, Alexander was a broken man. His eyes, red and swollen from crying, shimmered with tears he tried to swipe away in a rough, angry gesture, as if trying to shake off the weight of it all. "What's the point now?" he asked, his hoarse voice heavy with sorrow. "Tears won't bring Catherine back. Or the son who never got to take his first breath. We have to do something." His words carried not just pain, but determination, a final grasp for whatever could still be saved. He looked like a man on the edge, holding on for the sake of the tiny life Catherine had left behind. Driven by desperation and the aching need to ease the pain, Mary made a risky decision. "All babies look the same at first," she whispered to herself, trying to justify what she was about to do. "Maybe Anna won't notice. Maybe this will give them a chance." With a heavy heart, she handed Catherine's baby to Anna, praying that maternal instinct would override everything else, that the warmth of a newborn in her arms might melt away her pain. Her years of experience told her this could happen. She'd seen mothers accept children without question. And now, she hoped this would be the lifeline they all needed. But the moment Anna looked at the baby, she recoiled as if burned. "That's not my baby." Her scream was filled with terror. Her eyes welled up with tears, and her voice shook with rage and heartbreak. She didn't reach out. She didn't pull the baby to her chest like a mother longing for her child. Instead, she turned away, her shoulders shaking with sobs, and the words, "That's not my son," hit like a sentence. Mary Johnson froze, feeling guilt and helplessness tear her apart. She had only wanted to help, but instead, she had made the chasm between Anna and Alexander even deeper. Anna still had to face a painful conversation with her husband. And Alexander, overwhelmed by loss, knew that the truth was unavoidable. How else could he explain the baby he was planning to bring into their home? His soul was torn in two, guilt toward the wife he had betrayed, and love for Catherine's son, whom he had sworn to protect. He prepared himself to confess everything, the affair, Catherine, the baby, knowing each word would be like a dagger. But he couldn't lie. Not now. Not after losing so much. All he had left was this tiny boy, whose entire future now rested in his hands. Anna couldn't cope with the loss of her own son. Her soul was drowning in grief. And the terrible truth she'd just learned about the man she loved only deepened her already fragile state. "How dare you suggest that?" she shouted when Alexander told her everything and insisted that she register the baby as her own. "How can you even say that with a straight face? You cheated on me under my nose, your mistress had your child, and now you want me to claim her baby as mine." She couldn't bring herself to ask for a divorce, but she swore to herself that she would never again share a bed with her husband. The entire situation disgusted her so deeply, she couldn't find peace within herself. After locking herself in her room, Anna called her mother, who already knew everything and felt immense sympathy for her daughter's pain. "Can you believe the nerve of that man?" Anna fumed, pouring her heart out and telling her mother everything that had happened. "Sweetheart, just don't do anything rash," Natalia pleaded, fully aware how furious Victor would be if Anna decided to get a divorce. "Things happen in a marriage. You have to handle this with a clear head." But deep down, Natalia was outraged. Imagining herself in her daughter's shoes, she knew she could never accept another woman's child into her home, especially one born from her husband's affair. It was simply too much for any woman to bear. In the end, it was Alexander who made the decision. For the first time in his life, he took a firm stand, and he wasn't going to back down. "If you refuse to take this boy in as your own, then I'm filing for divorce," he said. "I'll raise him myself." He understood what that would mean, what consequences would follow. But he couldn't live under the same roof with a woman who hated his son. He was gone all day at work, and there would be no one to care for the baby except Anna, and he couldn't trust her with the child. That could lead to something much worse. "This is just too much," Natalia cried when Anna repeated her conversation with Alexander nearly word for word. "You know what? Pack your things and come home. I'll talk to your father, he'll give that man a piece of his mind." She was fuming, and by the time Anna arrived, she had already spoken to Victor. But his reaction shocked her. "Natalia, what are you even saying?" Victor snapped, clearly annoyed she had barged into his office while he was working. "The child is already born, and as harsh as it sounds, you can't put him back. Yeah, he's not ours by blood. But that doesn't mean he should end up in an orphanage. That's not human." Natalia insisted that Victor cut off all business ties with Alexander's father. "You need to tell him exactly what you think and cut him off, completely," she demanded. But Victor only laughed. He didn't even bother asking how she thought their business would survive, how she would keep her lifestyle, if he suddenly cut ties with his main partner. The conversation was over. Natalia went off to prepare the guest room for her daughter. When she saw Anna, she nearly gasped. "My God," she said. "You're so pale, you don't even look like yourself." She realized Anna needed nothing more than rest, so she made her a bed, poured her a cup of tea, and quietly closed the door. As soon as Anna heard her mother's footsteps fade away, she buried herself under the covers and burst into tears. While she had been around Alexander, she couldn't fully let her emotions out, but now that she was alone, the dam broke. Natalia tucked Anna's suitcase into the storage closet and headed to her own room. On the way, she passed her husband's study, and overheard a very curious conversation. "I told you you rushed things," a deep voice rumbled behind the door. "No, she's home now." "Yeah, she arrived today. So we'll have to sit down and talk calmly." "At your place?" "I'll be there soon." Natalia realized her husband was talking to Alexander, and was planning to visit him. On tiptoe, she slipped back to her room without being noticed. She was dying to know what Victor wanted to discuss with Alexander. As she waited for evening to come, flipping through a book, she tried to think of how she could ask him about the conversation without making it obvious that she'd been eavesdropping. But nothing came to mind, and without realizing it, she drifted off to sleep. She woke up that evening when Victor entered her room without knocking. "Oh, did I wake you?" he asked. "Sorry. Just wanted to let you know, I spoke to our dear son-in-law. There's not going to be a divorce." "What?" she asked in surprise, shocked that he'd volunteer the details so openly. It felt like a weight had lifted from her shoulders. Thank God, she thought to herself. No need to dig or pry. "That's right," Victor said. "Let him raise his illegitimate son. If Anna comes to her senses, she'll go back to him. If not, they can live separately, but still show up at events together. The last thing I need is gossip and scandal. I've got major deals coming up, and I'm not about to let family drama mess that up." Just then, the phone rang. When Victor saw Alexander's father's name on the screen, he cursed and stormed out of the room. This time, Natalia didn't try to eavesdrop. She was sure he'd tell her everything anyway, and she was right. Half an hour later, Victor came storming back into the room, fuming. "Can you believe this?" he exploded. "He's actually trying to lay down conditions for me." There was nothing surprising about it. Natalia had long known that her husband's business depended directly on Igor Clark. He had always called the shots. In fact, that's exactly why Victor had married off their daughter to Alexander. He believed that family ties would strengthen business relations, which, to him, were everything. So what did he say? Natalia asked once her husband had finished ranting and was ready to talk calmly. "Nothing," Victor grumbled. "He said he'd try talking to his son again, but if Alexander insisted on the divorce, he'd support him, and told us not to interfere. Can you imagine? He's forbidding me to get involved. It's unbelievable. And Anna's not much better, couldn't she have just kept her mouth shut? So what if the guy fathered a kid on the side? Happens all the time. If that Catherine were still alive, she'd never even know." Realizing Victor's anger was now shifting toward their daughter, Natalia rushed to Anna's room while her husband stormed off to his office. He didn't have the strength to confront Anna that day and decided to save the serious talk for later. "Fine, let him divorce me," Anna cried when her mother told her about Victor's conversation with Alexander. "I don't care anymore. He can marry 5 more mistresses and have a whole soccer team of kids with them for all I care." Natalia understood that Anna's anger was clouding her judgment, so she decided to give her time to cool off. But Anna only sank deeper into her grief with each passing day. She regularly visited the cemetery where her unborn son was buried and spent her days sobbing into her pillow. When Alexander eventually called to say he had officially filed for divorce, Victor was furious all over again. His relationship with Igor Clark was growing increasingly strained. Igor sided with his son and didn't oppose the divorce. Victor had no choice but to accept the situation. "Please, just don't take it out on Anna," Natalia begged. "She's barely holding on as it is." Seeing his daughter's fragile state, Victor didn't dare confront her. He continued to treat her the same as before and even made an effort to seem supportive. Meanwhile, Alexander couldn't stop thinking about Catherine. But more and more, he realized that those thoughts felt like nostalgia. Did he truly love her, the woman who had given him a son, who had died so young and suddenly? He wasn't sure anymore. One day, after Catherine's funeral, he returned to the cemetery to pay his respects, and unexpectedly ran into her mother, Olivia Thompson. He had been dreading this moment, unable to meet her eyes. At the funeral, she had sat quietly on a bench beside her daughter's grave, weeping. "Good afternoon," Alexander whispered, laying a small bouquet on the grave. "I didn't mean to intrude. I didn't know you'd be here. I'll go." "Wait," Olivia said. "There's something important I need to tell you." In recent years, her relationship with Catherine had become strained, full of unresolved tensions they never managed to overcome. Olivia had raised Catherine alone and had done everything she could to make her daughter happy. Still, she felt she had failed somewhere along the way. In her eyes, if their family had been whole, Catherine would never have gotten involved with a married man. She couldn't bear to be alone, Olivia continued. She always needed someone by her side to feel needed, to feel wanted. She chose you, and no one can be blamed for that. When Olivia found out that her daughter had been seeing a married man for years and had given birth to his child, she was stunned. She hadn't expected things to go that far. Catherine had left home determined to live independently, to stop hearing her mother's advice and judgments. But in the end, she became completely dependent on a man who could offer her nothing but financial support. To Olivia, that was devastating. Alexander hadn't hidden from her the fact that the newborn boy, Michael, was Catherine's son. He had told her during the funeral preparations. "You have a grandson," Alexander had said to her for the first time. "And if you want, you can be part of his life. You're welcome to visit, to be involved." At the time, Olivia hadn't responded, her grief was too overwhelming. It still was. But as she thought about little Michael's future, she came to a realization for the first time in her life: there's nothing worse than growing up without a father, but a child without a mother could never be truly happy either. "Listen to me, Alexander," she said after a long, heavy silence. "If we hadn't run into each other today, I still would have called you to have this conversation, just later. Right now, the future of your son, Catherine's son, my grandson, is in your hands. Only yours. But that boy needs more than just a father, he needs a mother, too. Think about that. Don't act out of pride or pain." She knew that after everything had come to light, Anna had left Alexander and he was now raising the baby on his own. She wished with all her heart things could have turned out differently. But she rejected the baby, Alexander said, realizing what Olivia was implying. "I'm not the bad guy here. I split up with her only because I'm scared for my son. How can I trust a woman who doesn't love him? You think I'm wrong?" "Don't act in haste," Olivia repeated softly, and without another word, she turned and walked away from the cemetery. From that day on, her words echoed endlessly in Alexander's mind, but he still wasn't ready to make peace with Anna. "How am I supposed to know what's going on in her head?" Alexander thought to himself. "Ever since she left for her mother's, she hasn't called me once. And she still calls herself my wife." He had been sure that once Anna found out he'd filed for divorce, she would reach out to talk. When that didn't happen, he was stunned. "Fine," he told himself. "Let her live her own life. I'll manage." In the end, it was his decision, and his alone to bear. "Anna, you've got to stop shutting yourself away. It's been 3 months since the divorce and you haven't even gone out to the theater," Natalia said one day, trying to persuade her daughter to attend one of the season's most important social events. But Anna refused. She was terrified of seeing Alexander there with someone new, and not being able to handle it. Natalia suspected her daughter's feelings for her ex-husband hadn't faded, even if the bitterness was starting to. Victor had also calmed down. He still worked with Igor Clark, and together they agreed the kids should figure out their relationship on their own. "You don't get it, Mom," Anna cried. "I just can't go." "Oh, I get it perfectly," Natalia replied. "But you don't need to worry, Alexander is still living alone. He has no one else. He's raising Michael." Anna was stunned by her mother's words. Is it really that obvious that I still think about him? That I miss him, she thought. As if reading her mind, Natalia added gently, you can't hide anything from your mother. So stop torturing yourself and get ready. It was painful for Anna to sort through the dresses she had left at her parents' house. Each one was a memory from the life she had left behind when she moved in with Alexander. Her heart ached, but guided by some inner impulse, she chose that dress, the one she had worn on their first date. The dress soaked in the warmth of young love and hope. And that choice didn't go unnoticed by Alexander. You look beautiful, he said softly, appearing beside her. His voice trembled. I was afraid you wouldn't come. You scared me. Anna exclaimed, though there was no trace of anger in her voice, only a nervous warmth she tried to hide. Why sneak up on me like that? Sorry, Alexander smiled guiltily, and in his eyes, she saw the same genuine tenderness she had once fallen in love with. One word led to another, and their conversation began to flow, like the melody of a long-forgotten song. Anna felt a quiet joy growing in her chest, though fear still held her back. She didn't want to show how much she still missed him. This is my life now, Alexander shared, his voice a mix of pride and exhaustion. I work from home, what else can I do with a baby? But I'm managing. For him. Later that evening, they quietly slipped away from the bustling restaurant and ended up on the riverbank, under the stars, listening to the waves and remembering how their story began. Alexander had married Anna out of duty, but over the years, he had grown to care for her deeply. It wasn't until he lost her that he realized how deeply she had rooted herself in his heart. Now, he regretted every rash decision he'd made. Where are our kids? Victor asked, scanning the restaurant but seeing neither Anna nor Alexander. Leave them be, Natalia said with a knowing smile. Let them talk. That night, their hearts, wounded by loss and separation, began to mend. Anna and Alexander became husband and wife once more. And little Michael gained a mother who loved him with all her heart. Their family, reborn from the ashes of pain, became a true source of joy for their parents. Alexander never looked at another woman again. His world was now filled only with Anna and their son. The shadows of the past faded in the light of their new beginning. 3 years passed since Anna and Alexander found their way back to each other. Their life, fragile like glass glued back together with love and patience, slowly filled with warmth. Together, they raised Michael, Catherine's son, whom Anna had embraced as her own, pouring her heart into him with endless care and tenderness. But deep inside, Anna still carried an emptiness, a longing for the child she had never been able to bring into the world. Alexander saw the silent ache in her eyes. Every time her gaze lingered on the empty cradle in the corner, his heart clenched with guilt and the desperate wish to make her happy. They never spoke about it, but both dreamed of a miracle. For 3 years, they tried to have a child. They went through endless tests, endless cycles of hope and heartbreak. Every negative result hit like a new blow. But Anna and Alexander held tightly to each other, and their love only grew stronger. They prayed, they waited, and in the darkest moments, when it felt like hope had faded, they found strength in Michael's smile, in his laughter, in the way his tiny hands reached out with such trusting love. And then, one quiet spring evening, as the first flowers bloomed outside their window, Anna felt something strange. Her hands trembled as she held the test. And the moment she saw those 2 faint lines, tears streamed down her cheeks. Her dream had finally come true. Alexander, her voice trembled with joy as she ran to him, holding the test like it was the most precious treasure in the world. He froze, not immediately understanding what was happening, then scooped her into his arms, spinning her around the room, his laughter mixing with tears. We did it, Anna. We did it, he kept repeating, holding her close as if afraid this moment might disappear like a dream. 9 months flew by in a blur of tender anticipation and quiet joy. Anna was glowing, her eyes shining brighter every day, and Alexander barely left her side, guarding their happiness as if it were the most fragile thing in the world. When the time came, the delivery was gentle, as if fate itself had finally decided to give them a moment of peace. In a sun-drenched hospital room, a tiny baby girl was born, delicate, soft-skinned, with dark eyes just like Alexander's. Her first cry, sharp and full of life, filled the room with a joy words couldn't capture. "Milana," Anna whispered, holding her daughter to her chest as tears of happiness streamed down her face. They had chosen the name early in the pregnancy, a name that felt like a promise of peace and love. It became a symbol of their new life. Alexander stood beside them, unable to take his eyes off his daughter. His hands trembled as he held her for the first time, warmth flooding his chest, washing away every scar the past had left behind. "She's ours, Anna," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "Our Milana." Michael, now a little older, peeked curiously into the crib and gently touched his sister's tiny fingers. "My sister," he said proudly, his smile so pure and sincere that Anna and Alexander couldn't hold back a fresh wave of tears. Natalia and Victor arrived at the hospital, overcome with emotion. Natalia hugged her daughter tightly, crying softly as she whispered, "You've earned this happiness, sweetheart." Even Victor, usually so stoic, wiped away a tear as he looked at his newborn granddaughter. That day, their home was filled with laughter, tears of joy, and a long-awaited warmth. Holding Milana in their arms and embracing Michael, Anna and Alexander knew their family was finally whole. The wounds of the past had healed, making room for a love stronger than anything they had ever faced. They were crying, but it was the kind of crying that feels like sunlight at dawn,